now recording this. So today's lecture is on myofascial lines, and I know I mentioned fascia a lot. It's fascinating. I always say that if I ask you a question and you say fascia, it's probably the right answer. And why don't we talk about it sooner? Why don't we put together these fascial lines sooner? And it's because we need you at a certain level of anatomy, and we have a one classroom model like all schools do, and everybody's at different levels, and we try to get everybody up to this kind of level where they know basic anatomy to where we can talk to you about how that basic anatomy hooks together in long chains. So I'm going to say some of this stuff twice to give it to you in two different ways because I want some conceptual understanding today. And this is just fun stuff as far as I'm concerned. Fun stuff that really makes your massage much more effective and more interesting. And, you're not going to be tested on it. But fascial understanding is really, really key to understanding how human bodies mechanically and architecturally and structurally work. And it's really new stuff. And it's not new science that just Mr. Tapscott thinks is amazing and you're going to go out in the world and other people are going to be like, that's not real. You're going to go out in the world and other people are going to be like, oh my gosh, we never learned that in massage school. We didn't even talk about it because they didn't really know about it back then. This is stuff in the last 20 years that sports physiologists and kinesiologists started to realize was really going on with the human body. Mr. McClure, please.
There's an amazing 55-minute documentary on a streaming service called Curiosity. It's like the first week is free, so anybody could watch it.
And what's it called?
It's only $3. But anyway, it's on fascia, and it's on like the new research and stuff. And they're saying that this guy proved that your emotional state has an actual physical response in your fascia, which is just amazing. Really validating for the work that I do.
Yeah.
The new science is just incredible. I mean, it validates the mind-body connection 100%.
Yeah. Thank you. I would love more interruptions like that. And I mean that truly. Yeah, so that's the next level too. So I'm going to talk to you about some of the mechanical stuff of fascia. But your fascial network has your nervous system network in it as well. And it really does seem to respond to your emotional state. And it even like in some obvious ways that would kind of make sense to you. Like when you're feeling emotionally guarded, your fascia seems to harden a bit. When you're feeling more open, it seems to soften a bit. I mean, there's just lots and lots of research to suggest all that's true. So, so it's super exciting. And whether you're somebody who's very kind of like, I don't believe any of that emotional mind-body connection stuff, fine. Fascia's got incredible mechanical validity that basically every sports physiologist in the world agrees with. But then it's got this much deeper kind of thing that it really does tie into mind-body connection stuff. And there's lots of research to back that up. So this isn't kind of foo-foo kind of stuff. So when I went to school, 28 years ago, and they were teaching about structural anatomy. And it wasn't just my massage school; it was the way it was taught everywhere. If you studied sports medicine or whatever, 30 years ago, they basically looked at muscles as being the locomotion for your body. Muscles can only do one thing: contract, and they would contract and pull the levers of your bones. And your bones came together, and those were joints. And you had tendons to attach the muscle to the bone, and ligaments to kind of tie the bones together. And you put some pads between the bones because they're going to impact. Like when you walk, you've got a pad between your femur and your tibia to help with the impact there. And they said that's how your body works. You are stacked up like a tower on top of, like brick on top of brick. And there's some soft tissue padding in there to help protect that, and the muscles provide locomotion, and that's it. Now, all that's true. None of that stopped being true. Your muscles do provide your locomotion. They do only contract. You have ligaments that really do hold your bones together. You do have padding between them to help with a little bit of impact, and your bones are stacked up on top of one another, basically. But But what they started to realize with computer models and stuff was that couldn't be telling the whole story, because the impact your body would take would be so massive that you wouldn't make it through a week. Like if bones really were just impounding on each other every time you took a step, it wouldn't work. And what they started to discover was there was a network of connective tissue in your body that runs everywhere and attaches everything and distributes forces through your body. That never are you using one muscle, one bone to support something ever, basically. And that this model of fascial connections really gave them a model that seemed to predict how the body would wear and tear and move much more accurately, and explained how you can run a marathon and not have your knees explode. Because just think about it. When I do a little jump like this, it's not 125 pounds or whatever I weigh coming 100. Ooh, Tapscott just lost 100 pounds. It's not 225 pounds coming down. Boom, wishful thinking there. It's much more. The impact is 300 pounds just from a little jump like that. And to run is a tremendous amount of impact. In 26 miles, your body really couldn't take it if you didn't have fascial networks that were absorbing that force, so your bones aren't really hitting one on the other. It's hard to imagine, but they're actually suspended in a fascial network. You actually have bones that in a real way are floating inside a fascial network that's preventing them from slamming into one another. And it's the thing that absorbs force in your body. And it's the reason you can get in a car wreck and sometimes just walk away from it. And so we're going to talk about that fascial network today and what makes fascia and why you might care as a massage therapist. But the real message here is everything's connected. And I'm glad that Mr. McClure spoke up too, because everything's connected. Like, we recognize now that your toe is connected all the way up to your head, but we also recognize your toe is connected all the way up to your head, and it's all connected to your heart and your thoughts. Everything's connected. And so please take that into your practice, because literally the way you treat your client affects the health outcome. It's not just, I don't care if you're just a good mechanical massage therapist. If you're not creating an emotionally healing environment for them, you are missing at least half the picture. You could argue you're missing the whole picture, but you're at least missing half the picture, because it all ties together intimately. We know fascia responds to people's emotional attitudes and such. So, and we also know it responds to physical forces and such. And it grows and it learns and it changes and it senses. And your fascia, by the way, with all your nervous system in here, is the reason that you think you're not having a dream right now. Your fascia is loaded with all your proprioceptors, which are nerves that are specifically designed to help you see yourself. That's what proprioception is, the ability to see yourself. It's the reason that Miss Cuppage knows she's laying down in bed right now, without actually having to look at herself on the camera to know she's laying down in bed. She can feel the impact of the pillows. She can feel how bent her elbow is, the angle of her neck. She can feel all that without looking, because her fascia is telling her that's what's going on. Your fascia really is your connection to the world. Very, very key. All right, so that's my intro. Let's look at some slides and we'll talk about this as we go. Yeah? And please feel free to raise hands, interject, interrupt, comment, argue, please. All right, let's see here. Yes, Miss Dowler, please.
So what's the difference between a muscle cell and a fascial cell?
Oh my gosh, I'm so glad you asked this.
And like when we're massaging, how do we treat the muscle differently than we treat the fascia? Or do we?
Yeah, no, it's just such a deep question. Thank you. All right, I'm going to try to answer this question as best I can. And by the way, Ms. Dowler, you and I have even had some conversations just one-on-one about the fact that some of the stuff I don't know and you'll discover it on your own, which is really exciting. And I really believe you will. So let's back up a little bit about how you guys, why fascia is so important and how we overlooked it. So we overlooked fascia in anatomy the same way fish overlook water. Fish don't swim around and think they live in water and this water is so great. In fact, by the way, you guys almost live in water yourself in a way. The reason airplanes can fly is because the atmosphere is that dense. I don't know if you've ever thought about that for a second, but that plane gets up off the ground because it's essentially swimming in air. And air is not this light stuff. It's very, very heavy. Your atmosphere weighing down on us right now is very heavy. It's very thick stuff. It has to be thick. Otherwise, you only could get up with a rocket. To have something actually fly through it on a wing requires very, very thick atmosphere, but you guys live in it, so you don't think about it. So fascia is so ubiquitous. It's so everywhere in your body that we forget it's there. And basically your whole body is fascia filled in with different stuff. So I am heading towards where you're talking about, Ms. Dowler. So if you take a spider web like network, going every which direction, by the way, and you leave it there, and it's made out of like this strong Spider-Man-y kind of material that's kind of stretchy, but kind of got some strength to it too, and you fill that material in with minerals like calcium and potassium and phosphorus, things like that, it gets hard and becomes a bone. The fascia doesn't go away. The network's still there. It's the rebar for it now, but it's filled in with this substance. If you take fascia and you fill it in with contractile tissue, you've got a muscle. The fascias around the outside of the muscle actually give it an integrity so it doesn't rip. And it gives it some of that springiness. But the muscle is the part inside that fascia that allows it to contract. And literally that fascia from the muscle, eventually the muscle disappears and there's only fascia left, and we call that the tendon. That weaves into the fascia of the bone. We call that periosteum, and the bone's filled in with all that. And then all this is wrapped in more fascia, more fascia, more fascia. So Ms. Dowler, I would say in general, I treat it more like fascia than muscle, even when I'm working on muscle, if that makes sense. And if somebody has a purely muscular soreness, like just from working out, there's not really anything wrong with them, they heal very, very quickly because muscles are highly vascular. They respond really well to just getting circulation going. But most people's structural problems are more fascial in nature. They've got a long-term learned problem there that needs to be opened up, so to speak. And so I think dealing with it as though it's fascia, Ms. Dowler, as though it's slow-changing tissue, makes more sense in general. Which, by the way, Ms. Dowler, I've had your massage, is very much your style of massage. You know, I don't want to oversimplify it, because I am oversimplifying it right now, but your massage is a very slow, methodical massage that gives time for the client, heart and mind, and their fascia to adapt to the stretching type movements you are doing. Which gives it time for change.
So, like, what's the degree that you could change fascia, like, over a period of time? Like
if you got a lot of time?
I'm trying to think about efficiency.
Oh.
Because I feel like you can't forget about efficiency.
Yeah, I love that. Oh my gosh, I love this. All right, Ms. Dowler. So that's the reason for my lecture today.
Okay.
So, because you're absolutely right. So Ms. Dowler just said this really neat thing. I hope I'm not putting words in your mouth. Correct me if I am. But what she's saying is fascia takes a long time to change. Like, you can't just like be like, let's stretch this arm out. Boom. That will tear the arm. Like if it doesn't go out that far already. So fascia takes a long time to change, just like emotional healing that's tied to the fascia takes time. You can't just be like, get over it. Like that doesn't work with people. Any of us, right? We have to process. Fascia has to process too. And it takes a long time, and it basically is like stretching. It is stretching, and you're stretching, and it can only stretch so far, and it's time consuming. And it can only stretch so far before it tears in one session. You can't just say, I'm just going to keep pushing on this thing, and we're going to get it open right now. That's not a possibility. Usually fascia lets you move it a little bit, and then it can kind of learn that new holding pattern, and that's all you're going to get out of it. So efficiency-wise, like, you're only going to get a little bit of change. So one of the solutions to that, Ms. Dowler, which unfortunately doesn't speed up the speed of your movement, but is what I try to do when there's a problem, then, is find the fascial chain the problem is on and get that much change on every section of the fascial chain. Right? So if I have I was just trying to think of a better example, but anyway, if I have a chain, like of links, a chain, and I can put a millimeter in each link, and there's 50 links, at the end I've got 5 centimeters more, and that's a lot. Like at the end I've added 5 centimeters to the length of that whole thing. And we know this works in fascial chains. So, like, if somebody's having a hard time bending over and touching their toes, and you work the whole back fascial line, you can see quite a bit of improvement in one session. Because you gave them a tiny bit of improvement through the whole chain of events. Just like, kind of like in your personal life, if I could make everything today, everything in your life, 1% better, you'd be like, I'm having an amazing day and I don't know why. And everything would be almost imperceivable. Your drive to school would be just 1% better. Just one less little annoying thing, just almost imperceivable. Your bank account would have just 1% more money in it. You know, you just get 1% more right, 1% less wrong. All this kind of stuff, but it would add up to a fantastic day. And that's actually a lot of what we try to do in massage, is get things to move 1% more farther in that one area, and then go through a whole chain of events to get them better throughout the whole thing, right? It's a good way to approach your life, too. And by the way, this is kind of how we approach clients, too. Emotionally, we're not therapists, but I do try to say, like, when they are giving me stuff that's going on in their life, is there any way that I can restate this in a way that's truthful but slightly better? You know? So, like, to help them move that along. Mr. Kachekian.
I don't know if this is unrelated, but how much of this is related to like vasodilation and like increasing the space between space in the veins and the arteries to keep circulating the blood?
Well, actually, it is related. I mean, in so many different ways. So,
because when you say like when there's when there's fascia, that's like there's a constriction of that area, right? So less blood is getting to that area, right?
Right. So, very simply put, 2 things are really important for fascia to be healthy and not constricted. And one is it needs nutrients from blood. It is living tissue. Fascia is living tissue, and it needs nutrients from blood. And if the blood's not getting in there, it's not getting nutrients, so it's not healthy, right? The second thing is, and we're about to learn about this, fascia has something called ground substance. Don't worry about that yet. But fascia needs to be wet, really simply put, and wet inside your body. And the blood is what wettens it. And it needs liquid to feed its ground substance. And if it's not wet, it tends to be constricted and hard and reduce blood flow. So you're absolutely right, Mr. Kachekian. You get into a cyclical problem, right? Where if my fascia's tight, it restricts often blood flow to itself, and it needs the blood flow to be looser, which is why massage works very well when you're just trying to even increase circulation.
Yeah, I was just thinking this in my mind, like if you don't have proper circulation of your blood, then that's going to your heart and then going back out to your body.
Yeah.
That's going to cause issues,
Yes.
right?
Yes. Yes, 100%.
Okay.
And to tie this back in to you, Miss Dowler, I'm just spitballing here at this point, but it's a good spitballing. That might be part of your speed solution. Is like, hey, we know circulation in general helps, so maybe I have a circulation part of my massage that's fast and brisk, and it's really meant to just pump blood through them, warm tissue up so we can just get some general better flow here and just kind of help everything. And then I go back and try to slowly, methodically stretch out the very specific fascial lines that I'm working on. Yeah. But by the way, just so you know, at least my experience, Ms. Dowler, and for all of you, when you're a really good massage therapist, you never have enough time. You might get more efficient. You can get more done than another therapist in the same amount of time, but you never have enough time because there's so much stuff you always want to do. So you always feel like you're running out of time. Yes, Ms. Dowler.
One thing that I have noticed is that when my client falls asleep, the fascia changes faster.
Well, that would tie into, I think, what Mr. McClure is talking about. You know, I mean, I don't want to put words in his mouth now, but we're saying that when you don't have mental and emotional resistance from them, then the fascia seems to change quicker. That's what I'm hearing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So I love this discussion because we just saw 3 different people talk about 3 different things that are all very related. Right? And we're kind of talking about the stuff that's going to shape you guys about what type of therapist you want to be. And there's not a right or wrong answer to that. Like, how are you going to work all this into a session and do what it seems you do and then see if it's working and how are you going to tweak it? Yeah. Really, truly cutting edge stuff. Yeah. All right. Again, I really meant it. Keep raising your hand. Keep speaking up. All that kind of stuff. Let me share this. Here we go. Let's see. Come on. It's coming. All right. So, myofascial lines. What does myofascial mean? Myo is the prefix for muscle, and fascia is fascia. So, used to hear massage therapists talk about muscles, muscles, muscles. Sometimes they talk about tendons and ligaments, but that was it. Myofascial is really a term that most massage therapists use now because they recognize there is no separating the muscle from the fascia. Muscle is wrapped in fascia. It's what gives it integrity. Bones are wrapped and have fascia throughout them. Your whole body has fascia wrapped around it. And so we tend to talk about myofascial work. It would be very appropriate for any of you to say, I'm a myofascial therapist. In fact, I would use that term. I think it sounds better than I'm just a massage therapist, but that's just me. And think about, by the way, what title would you give yourself? Even if you didn't tell anybody, are you a structural therapist? Are you a myofascial therapist? Are you just a Swedish massage therapist? There's nothing wrong with that. You know? Are you an energy worker? Are you a performance enhancement specialist? You know, what is it you're trying to accomplish in your general massage? What's the stuff that interests you? So, myofascial lines are the concept of how we actually really move. So remember kinesiology. Kinesiology is the study of movement. And in order to understand that, you have to have anatomy first. Anatomy was all the parts. You guys have studied all the parts. You have studied all the muscular parts. Then how do those muscular parts work? Essentially, they contract. And then they affect your joints. And that's the biomechanics, basically, of your body. And all of this put together is the study of kinesiology. And what we find is that basically nothing in your body really works by itself. Everything works in movement patterns or what they call kinetic chains. And kinetic chains mean that there's a whole chain of energy and movement that happens when you are using your body. And these kinetic chains correspond to myofascial chains, that we're going to talk about here, and neural chains, which is your nervous system is part of these chains too, and your nervous system seems to run along these chains, seems to be aware that these chains exist, all this kind of mind-body connection. And if you create problems in any of those areas, you can have problems with the entire network. So if you have a problem with a joint along that chain, you can have a problem with the entire network. If you have a problem with the nervous system along that chain, you can have a problem with the entire network then. Or if you have a problem with the fascia along that chain, you can seem to have a problem with the entire network because your body is aware it's a network. So if your body senses there's a problem in the network, it might try to tighten up the whole network to protect you. All right, we can, well, I was wondering how much depth I want to go into here because I want to get to fascial chains too. All right, so, oh, ubiquitous, yeah, the word I used. Okay, that's my $5 word for the day. Bones have fascia in them. Fascia has fascia in them. Tendons is fascia. Ligaments are fascia. Bursae sacs are sacs of fascia. Joint capsules are made of fascia. Cartilage is fascia. Periosteum is fascia. Blood is fascia, believe it or not. Blood is a connective tissue. And we don't think of it that way. You go, but Tapscott, my blood's liquid. Yeah? What happens when you cut yourself? Oh, it hardens and there's this almost network that hardens and seals off the area. Yeah, that network is fascia. And it's dried up, by the way. That's what dried up fascia does. It hardens and protects, but it doesn't really stretch anymore, does it? That's the problem with fascia that's not getting nutrients anymore. It hardens and it seals and it protects, but it doesn't move. And oftentimes we have clients that come to us and have protected too well. And now we need to start creating movement again. Even your adipose tissue, your fat, has fascia around it to hold it in place. So it's everywhere. Do they talk about what's in it? We're going to get there. Bear with me here. Okay. So what's fascia made out of? Fascia is really, really fascinating stuff, and it's made out of essentially 3 ingredients. Collagen, elastin, and something they call ground substance. I don't know if I like the name ground substance because it's kind of confusing, but really it's the jello. It's the jello that the collagen and elastin are in. So, picture some lovely jello, and just in your mind, we've all had jello, I hope. If you haven't, you need to. It's a rite of passage for every child to adulthood. So we've all had jello, and in that jello, your jello is the ground substance, right? And what's neat about jello, by the way, when jello gets really cold, it gets really rubbery and it starts to get harder. When you go to hot yoga and the jello gets really warm, it starts to get more liquidy and it's much more malleable. And ground substance is the same way. It is very heat sensitive. Warming it up really does seem to make it more malleable. Now, in that jello, in that ground substance, are some fibers running through it, but like hairs running through it. And they give it strength. And one of those fibers is you've got a whole bunch of collagen fibers. And you can think of them like tiny little steel wires in the jello. And they're there to help keep the jello from tearing. Because we would like the jello to stretch, we would like it to be malleable, but we don't want it to tear. Miss Sawick, please.
So, as you get older, you lose collagen. I'm assuming you also lose the collagen in your fascia. So
Yeah.
does that then become looser and more malleable? Or just loses its strength?
It loses its strength, it seems like. And by the way, that is why you can kind of see, like, when people are really old, like, their skin can tear and things like that. So you're right, it does lose strength. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. It doesn't exactly lose elasticity because your body does some compensating because it knows it's losing strength. So it tends to lose hydration too. And what it does is it just becomes less malleable. It becomes less everything. It loses some of that. Which is why hydration is really important. Exercise is really important because it tends to feed your fascia. we also see that people that are emotionally willing to be vulnerable tend to, as they age, tend to have better fascia. There's a mind-body connection there. Thank you, Mr. Wick, by the way. So collagen is like these steel fibers. They're microscopic, by the way, okay? But they're in our jello, so there's steel wires in our jello. And collagen, by the way, pound for pound, if you compare a pound of collagen to a pound of steel, is stronger than steel. Mother Nature is amazing. So the stuff inside your body is better building materials than we build skyscrapers out of and such. That collagen is really, really strong, but it's also really, really tiny. So, but if you have that same collagen made out of steel, the collagen would be a better substance. It is stronger than steel, pound for pound. So you've got this very lightweight stuff inside the jello that helps keep it from tearing. It's lightweight little wires. You've also got rubber bands in the jello, and that's elastin. And they do exactly what you think rubber bands do. They allow the jello to expand and snap back. So all fascia is made this way. Fascia in different areas has different amounts of these things. So let's say that you have a ligament that's attaching bone to bone in an area where you don't need a lot of stretch, you need a lot of strength. That fascia, that ligament, might have more collagen than other fascia in other areas that have more elastin that need to stretch more, if that makes sense. And by the way, it's going to have less ground substance in it, which makes it much more dense and much stronger, but also means it heals slower, because the ground substance is also where all the hydrating and lubricating and nutrients are for the fascia to kind of keep it healthy. So your body, basically all the fascia and connective tissue in your body is made up this way, but in different amounts. And this tells us the nature of fascia to begin with. So I want us to just think, I don't mean to bore you guys too, but I want us to think, just knowing this knowledge of the three things that make up fascia, what it tells us about fascia and what it tells us about working with fascia. Ground substance changes via temperature, just like jello does. So warming up a muscle makes it more malleable, right? This is why a lot of injuries, by the way, with athletes, I mean, I understand there's those injuries on the field where they're running really fast and they turn left and they blow out a knee or something. But a lot of injuries happen when they're not warmed up, right? Their fascia's cold, they go running all of a sudden and they tear something because there's no elasticity there. The ground substance hasn't been warmed up. So that's what we know about that. We know that there's an elastic property of fascia that's meant to snap back, which means that your body is designed on this kind of elastic principle. And part of fascia's job is to help you absorb forces and reuse forces. So elastin helps you do some really neat stuff. Like you fall down and your body goes boom, 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 and it distributes that force out through your body so you don't break a hip. Because you can, if you're healthy, you can take some pretty hard falls and be okay. And fascia lets you do that because the elastin, but fascia also helps you, if we got any runners out there, you're running on your fascia. Your fascia is also designed to absorb a force like a rubber band and snap it back. Otherwise, every step you took when you were running would be you starting over again. But instead, when you're running, you're kind of boinga, 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 and the muscles are providing assistance. But actually, a lot of your fascia is boinga, 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 boinga along. And that's the elastin too in there. And then the collagen is meant to help it keep its shape so you don't stretch it out of all proportion and you don't tear. Now, because that collagen and elastin is inside a ground substance, it can be slowly encouraged to lengthen. It can learn new patterns. And the fibers can even grow in different directions depending on the stresses put on it. But just things to think about there. This ground substance, by the way, is part of the reason why your body swells when it's injured, because it actually creates some strength in it when it swells. It actually helps it not re-injure itself again. All right, so I just said all that. So the elasticity helps it return to its original shape. Plasticity is another function of your fascia, and it will adapt to new configurations. So along the lines of what a couple of you have already kind of hinted on, that's a lot of what we're trying to do, is get fascia to lengthen or expand where it has become too contracted for somebody. And fascia, because fascia responds to long, slow stresses to it, when somebody like this gentleman here is sitting at a desk here, when somebody sits at a desk for long periods of time, and I don't mean for a day, I meant over the course of years, they tend to build up fascial holding patterns back here in the back of their head to help hold the weight of their head up. Well, that's fine, but later on that causes them problems because the fascia becomes too thick back here and not very movable. So just getting them moving again makes a really big difference. And a lot of the problems you're going to see with people coming in are fascial-related problems, where they've overused their fascia in some manner. In fact, plantar fasciitis on the bottom of your feet is usually an overuse syndrome where you've bounced along the fascia on your feet, which is doing exactly what it's designed to do. Ba-bump, 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 squeeze, squeeze, squeeze. Elast and elast and elast and snap back. And if you do it too often without letting it rest, it starts to wear down the fascia, and the fascia gets irritated and it starts swelling. It's swelling to protect itself and get stronger, but then if you don't let it rest and recoup, it doesn't ever get better. And by the time it's gotten to that point, it takes quite a while to get better. Fixotropy. Fixotropy is not something you necessarily need to remember, but it's just what I talked about. Fascia will respond to changes in temperature. And so fixotropy is really talking about the ground substance heating up and the fact that when it's warmed up, fascia is more malleable and more easy to deal with. So this is a tower, I think it's about 100 feet tall. I want you to think about this for a second. This is us laying underneath the tower looking up into the sky. Do any of those poles touch another pole? They do not. They're all just connected with wires. And this tensegrity model is how they believe your body is suspended together. So with this tensegrity model, if you've got tendons and ligaments and other types of fascia representing the wires here, they can support the bones that are represented by the poles here without the bones actually hitting each other. You aren't really just running along having your knees pound together. You're actually separated by the tension in this fascia to help prevent that very thing. And this tower is very fascinating because it shows how you can build a tower up without ever having the poles attached to each other. The other beautiful thing that I can't show you in this slide because it doesn't move is if you mess with one of those wires, the entire tower changes to absorb that force. Tensegrity models distribute force throughout the entire model. Yeah? And so very much so we believe you're built on a tensegrity model, which is radically, radically different than what we thought 30 years ago, where we thought those poles were stacked on top of each other and that was it. It's just basic, and they had little hinges between them and that's it. We really think you're built on a tensegrity model instead. And a lot of what your muscles are designed to do is actually provide the right amount of tension to make that model work right. They're not meant to support the whole thing. Oh, here's a side view of this tensegrity model. It's a great picture where you see that things are not actually touching one another. They're all connected, but it's not magical. But they're not touching one another. And it's the way your body absorbs forces and all that kind of good stuff. Here's a tensegrity arch, all that good stuff. And this is some other clear models of the body where people started to adapt tensegrity models to how your hips and your spine. Do these look a little bit like vertebrae here? And do these look a little bit like rotatories and multifidus and things like that? Or look at this leg where we see how the hamstrings and the calves crossing over and all that stuff actually help to provide support in a way that the knees don't impact one another. Here's a tensegrity model of the entire body. And you can see diagonal lines that look like external and internal obliques, tying down to IT bands, tying down to tibialis anteriors and all that kind of stuff. Very cool. You can buy these models, by the way, like on Amazon. They're kind of cool. If you want fun stuff in your massage studio. Yeah. I can see Miss Cuppage doing that. You will. You'll buy one of these. I don't know which one. I don't know. You're more of a spine person or a legs person? I don't know.
I like the spine.
Yeah. Good. Let's move on here. So, we're not going to go into all this because you don't need it yet. Let's see. So this is why water is so important in your fascial network. And what they're trying to make a comparison here too is your fascial network actually has more strength when it's lubricated, just like a plant. You guys watch when a plant droops. And have you ever watered a plant like an hour later, it's all perky? That's because its cells are actually low of water, and the cells are used as part of the structure. Well, your fascia works the same way. It's not just your bones holding you up. It's all the cells in your fascial network and the pressure within them, like little water balloons holding you up. I know it sounds crazy, but it's really, really true. Okay, so this person's just getting water here. So, why is this important? It's because actually, if you did some of the feats that you guys take for granted every day, you'd snap in two if there wasn't a fascial network. What they're trying to show you in this picture is if you were curling, you know, whatever it is you curl, some of your bones would not be able to take it. But what happens is your whole body distributes that force throughout your entire body, and it really ever isn't a single bone taking the weight of curling. Like, have you ever thought, like, how can a human, we always get so impressed that a human being can squat 1,000 pounds. And it is impressive. And there are several hundreds of people now that can do it. Squat, put 1,000 pounds on their back and squat and get back up again. And we're always impressed how strong they are and how muscular they are. And that is impressive. But I think we should be more impressed that their bones don't literally explode into dust. Think about the vertebrae that's holding that thing up. Why don't they just... Think about their feet. Think about the little bones in their feet that are now have 500 extra pounds over each one of those feet. And that's because your body distributes forces so well and uses a tensegrity model. This is when they started to discover that the fascial network was really key to understanding the body, because without it, you actually couldn't do those things. They started realizing that the current model they had 30 years ago didn't explain how somebody could put 1,000 pounds on their back and not literally crumble. And they realized there had to be other stuff going on. And so fascial networks allow you to be so much more than you are. Be so much more than just a mechanical robot that bends at the elbow, so to speak. Okay. All right. We're not going to talk about end-fill yet because that's something completely different. Or that. So, we're going to take a break here in a second, but I just want to finish on something before we kind of move on to the next thing. So, we also know that when fascial networks compensate for problems in your body, they have to compensate all the way through the network. So if your head gets, tilted forward, other things have to come forward and other things have to come back to balance that out. And we've been talking about this since day one. You know, if my head goes forward, my butt has to go back, that kind of thing. And all I want you to realize just from this simple slide here, really, is is just the fact that this is why we see problems in the front and the back of the body, and how it's not just a neck problem, it's not just a back problem. We start to see all these different types of postural problems because of the forces put on somebody. And when there's a, don't worry about the particulars of this picture, we'll get to that. But the fact that it's not just a simple thing, it's an entire network. And when there's a problem in one part of the network, the other parts of the network, just like the tensegrity model, have to compensate. Have to compensate. So you guys do this in your own life, right? If your teacher puts stress on you and gives you a test, right? Then Mr. Bigelow goes home. I'm just going to use him as an example. I don't know if it's true, Mr. Bigelow. But Mr. Bigelow goes home. I gave him a big test that day. I put a stress on him. And now he goes home and tells his wife, I can't cook dinner tonight. I've got this big test Tapscott gave me. His wife has to compensate and start making dinner. He tells the kids, I can't play with you tonight. I got to do this test. The kids have to compensate and play on their own. He can't walk the dog. The dog has to go without being walked, so he's got to compensate for the test. And what happens is he distributes his stresses out that he got from Mr. Tapscott to the rest of the family. Now, there's nothing wrong with that. But your body does the exact same thing. It has to distribute stresses out. There is no such thing as like, oh, I just have a problem here. That's it. Nowhere else. My body has to compensate for that because it was designed to work together. So we want to look at whole fascial networks when we see a problem in somebody, because the area that we notice the problem or they're having the pain is just where it got bad enough to bother them. That doesn't tell us that's the source of the problem, right? We don't know that at all. So Mr. Bigelow, who I'm using this example, you know, I keep giving him tests and I keep stressing his system, and he keeps asking his wife, you know, to cook dinner. And finally she's like, you know, to hell with you. It's your job to cook dinner. I am mad. I'm really mad, and I'm not doing it. I was going to think of worse things, but anyway, I don't want to put that on you, sir. But she's really mad, and she's had it, and she's angry, and she's yelling. That's somebody's hurt neck. She's yelling. Is she the problem? No, she's the symptom. Is even Mr. Bigelow the problem? Nope, he's actually kind of a symptom too that's trying to distribute the force. Who's the problem? Mr. Tapscott's the actual problem that keeps putting the stress on that system. So be very careful. Should we address Mr. Bigelow's wife, though, who's yelling? Yes. Yes, we need to take care of her because she's in pain, and she's going to stress the system back. This is where we get in a pain cycle. She's now yelling at him. Mr. Bigelow comes, to class in a crappy mood. He yells at me. Now I'm pissed at him. I give him double homework. And we have what's called a pain cycle, right? And I think this is actually a very good way to kind of look at that. So in a pain cycle, we need to address where the pain is presently coming from, which is his wife. But don't ever mistake his wife for the cause. So when somebody comes in you with a hurt neck, please address their hurt neck, because you can make it feel better instantly, pretty much. In 5 minutes, you can make it better. And please acknowledge that, but don't stop there and think that the neck was actually the problem. It's actually very highly likely that it's not the problem. Could be, but it's very likely it's not. Mr. Kachekian.
I don't know if I'm way off here, but is it like exogenous and endogenous, changes in your environment that affect what's going on with you, like internally or externally? That's
Sure.
what I mean.
If I understand you correctly, yes. So these could be changes coming from the outside of your environment or within your environment, sure, that affect your body. These can be emotional changes. By the way, this whole time that I was using this crazy example with Mr. Bigelow, like his body would be going through changes too, right? Does his body shape change when his wife yells at him? I suspect it does. I suspect he either, and by the way, so this is no psychological analysis of you, but he either collapses in a little bit because he's like, you're making me feel small and I need to be guarded. And his fascia is now going to reflect that. And by the way, if she's been yelling for years, because I've been giving him tests for years in this ridiculously hypothetical situation, he now actually has shortened chest muscles and he's shortened fascia here, and he actually comes to you a little bit like this. Now, maybe, by the way, he responds to stresses differently. Maybe when she yells at him, he puffs up, and he's got different types of things. But the fact is, he will physically respond to that emotional stimulus. Now, could that stimulus come from actually inside him, Mr. Kachekian? Yes. Could Mr. Tapscott not assign any tests, and Mr. Bigelow, who we are again just using hypothetically here, Mr. Bigelow just decides he's not a very worthy human being for no reason, which we've all done. I'm sure everybody here has done. I definitely have, right? It's a lie, but it's a lie we're really good at telling ourselves. Would he also reflect that fascially? Yes. Will that also ripple out to other areas of his life and his body? Yes, absolutely. So those stresses can come from anywhere, sir, if that answered your question.
Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Bigelow, for being so indulgent. I like the whole mind-body connection, and yeah. Miss Smith.
So I'm curious with like all this newer research coming out with like myofascial chains. Would you ever change your curriculum to teaching by the fascial chains?
So, I should. I should, and I've actually been kind of looking for, I've been lazy. I've been looking for a book that would kind of do that for me and then adapt the curriculum to it. But yes, I actually think it would be much better.
Yeah, or I guess maybe a better question is that more where massage education is going? Like that is going to be like.
I'm guessing, except massage education. When I talk to other people at other schools, they're like, we didn't learn about any of this. I'm like, really? They don't even learn about the muscular anatomy that much. I'm really shocked. So, but yeah, I would assume it's going to go that way. It sure is the way sports physiology is going. It's not, the reason I keep mentioning sports physiology is even if somebody's not into sports, we all move the way sports physiology does. But anyway, yeah, Miss Smith, in a perfect world, that's how I think I should teach it. Yeah. You got gypped. But you got the
I'm not thinking that. I'm just like thinking because I don't know. It's a consideration for me one day, like after working in the field, to teach anatomy and massage. I really like it.
Yeah.
And so I'm just like kind of thinking, would that teaching like by the fascial lines, not necessarily by fascial groups, would just help people get like a full grasp more on that?
Yes. In fact, I just realized this. I teach, at least before COVID, I used to teach a continuing ed course on just fascial lines. And all we do is really review your anatomy based on fascial lines, though. So we would skip over stuff that didn't, like, we'd be like, what is this attached to? Where's that going? Why do I care about this area? And very much what you're talking about. But it was a little bit easier doing it with people that at least had general anatomy, and then we tied it together, so I don't know. Yeah. Anyway, but yes, you should. That would make a radical program. Don't offer it in Arizona because you compete with me. Yeah. Miss Stewart.
Yeah, I was gonna actually ask if you would like ever do a continued education on like myofascial release.
Yeah, we will. We have and we will again.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because I would totally sign up for that. That's something that I wanted to do anyways for that I was gonna get into. So if you talk about that, I'd be there.
All right, I love that. By the way, we're gonna have this is not a plug. It's just you guys made me think of it. We're going to have a continuing ed course, not taught by me, actually, taught by a guest speaker, right after you guys graduate. Like, not right after, but weeks after you graduate, at Central City, I believe, where you're graduating, it's like I think it's an 8-hour course on running your massage business. And the reason I brought this person in to do it is because she runs a very successful massage and continuing ed business. And I think she's sharp, and she's doing it live kind of thing. And so that's something to think about. If any of you are like, oh, I could use a little kickstart on my business, we're going to offer that.
Yeah, I was kind of thinking about doing a small business course or like certification, like maybe doing like an online business coach, but like this is like specific for massage.
It's specific for massage. It's specific. It's from a woman, and I think that's important for some reason, like an empowered woman who's been doing it. And yeah, I'm all about it. I really am. Definitely women are the better sex. I'm okay admitting it. It's been true in my life. Like I would not be here in front of you today if it was not for the wonderful women in my life, period. bar none. Any good quality you see in me, from a woman. Any bad quality, probably from my dad, who I love. Yeah, it's taught by her. She does the thing. It's specific to massage, and it counts as continuing ed. So you got all that going for you. Yeah. Miss Tops.
Is there any way you can send us the information, maybe after we graduate or before we graduate?
Oh yeah,
via
yeah. You
email?
guys,
Okay.
you're gonna get it. You're gonna be on our continuing ed list. Like you're gonna be the first to get the information. Yeah, we'll offer it first to you guys. Yeah. So absolutely, yes, ma'am. And by the way, I would think you're gonna see that in about a week because
Okay.
we're setting up the course right now. Yeah. Okay. Any other questions? All right. Let's take a 10-minute break and come back. What is that? 10:01. Cool. 10:01. Thank you, everybody. I think you'd have to control the size of your brick and mortar, but like there's some kind of neat deals around town. Like I don't know if you guys have seen, but they'll have these kind of mini malls. They're all indoors. They even have a receptionist usually, but they have like 50 different practitioners inside the thing. And they have tiny studios. They're really nice, super nice, but tiny. It's enough for like you and your massage table, a sink, and there's a shared bathroom, multiple around the thing, and they take care of the maintenance of all that. And so your rent for that brick and mortar is way less. And many people even split them. They go, well, I only work 4 days a week, so I want somebody else to pay the other 3 days of rent. I'll split it with a friend or something. Like
Abby and I were talking about doing that.
Yeah, like salon
Something
suites.
like that.
Thank you, Mr. Bigelow. Like salon suites. I always wished I owned a salon suites, the concept. But anyway, it's a great deal for the owner because they get a lot of rent for that place. But it's a great deal for you because you're not paying for all this stuff and you even have to manage it. Like you don't have to worry about cleaning the bathrooms. You don't have to worry about the receptionist up front.
Right.
And then you don't have to charge as much. And I would think $100 massages would easily float that. The other thing you might want to consider someday is if you ever do want to work out of a house and get a house. If you're talking about brick and mortar, I worked out of my house for a long time, and this was a long time ago, and I would charge $100 to come to you and only $50 for you to come to me.
Yeah.
Now, I don't know how...
I was thinking of
Yeah.
going around Arcadia, like printing up, getting 500 flyers.
Yeah.
With a QR code for a scheduling, like an online scheduling website,
Yes.
so they don't have to call me, they could just do it online.
Yes.
And saying like, new massage therapist for Arcadia, $75 or $80. Because it's kind of a joke, but it's true. I'm used to being a little poor, and I'd only have to do 2 $80 massages a day, 5 days a week to make what I'm making now. So, I mean, that's before taxes, but if I could do 4 massages in a day, I would easily get a 30% income increase, and I'd be working half as much.
Yeah.
So
what you're really telling me too, just something for you to think about too. I've been in a similar situation. It's kind of cool. So if you had 5 weekly 2-hour clients, like clients that came for 2 hours, if you had just 5 of those, that could be your entire business. I mean, you're going to have more than that. They're going to send you other people, and it doesn't work that way exactly. But my point is, it's kind of a cool concept to think, wow, if I just had 5 really good clients, I've got kind of a little business right there, yeah. Anyway, yes, I think you should do that. I'd also offer some kind of, even though I'm not a big discounter, but for the first massage I would. Like if you come to me, and you'll give out some massages for whatever you charge, $40, $50, that you never see them again. But, good way to get the word out kind of thing. Yeah. I think it's a very good idea. Yeah.
like do and like little advertising things like hour minimum.
Oh yeah.
Like maybe you do like 5 or 10 minutes extra, just because I would have the extra time.
I used to
like 2 hours apart and stuff.
Yes, with my home clients, I always ran over. I think it was 5 minutes. I mean, on purpose, ran over 5 minutes because I wanted to kind of not be nitpicky with them. And if they were on time, and I had, you know what I mean? I didn't run over a lot, but I always ran over some just to kind of show, like a little thank you gift or something. I don't know. I just didn't want it to be down to the minute with them. I didn't want them to feel, at an establishment, sometimes you have to run down to the minute. But at my home, I didn't. I would run a little bit over, just as kind of a, I don't know, just as a gesture. Yeah,
Cool.
it's very cool. Hey, on a personal note, I want to thank you for something. You just did it again today. But I want to thank you for it because I did it to myself a couple of days ago. And I said something derogatory to myself. And I said, hey, don't talk to my friend that way. And I said it because of you saying that to me originally. And it was just a nice little reminder. Like, I mean, words have power.
Yeah.
And I know that. And so it's nice to be reminded of that. So I greatly thank you.
You got to catch yourself. I mean, we all live in our own stories, and why not make it a good one, you know?
Yes.
Why have to beat yourself up over nothing?
Yeah.
When you could just congratulate yourself over nothing.
Yeah, that's right. Well said. Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more. And I really agree. We live in our own stories. Okay, and we live in our fascia.
And all fascia. Functional fascia.
All right, everybody. Let's go back to a little bit of fascia. Let me share a little bit more here. Da-da-da-da. Bum, bum, bum. We're actually going to get to fascial lines here in about 2 seconds. Come on. So, we are going to learn about fascial lines. That's what we're going to focus on here in just a second, what muscles make up fascial lines and all that good stuff. But I want to point out, too, a lot of people think of, and books talk about it, and it's true that you have a fascial suit over you, but we want you to remember that you're a three-dimensional fascial kind of network, too. And that a lot of your structure and integrity comes from internal fascia and internal muscles that run especially in your core. And what this picture is trying to show you is that one of the ways that a barrel gets integrity is by being able to build pressure up inside the barrel and push out, and by having rings around the barrel that counteract that pressing out, and even having levels to the barrel. And so they now believe that your diaphragm is not there just to breathe. Of course it's there to breathe. Of course that's the most important thing, that you keep breathing. But it also helps to control barrel pressure here in your rib cage. It helps to act as a level and helps to pull against your ribs as your air pressure pushes out against your ribs. And the same thing's true with your pelvic floor. And if you've ever lifted up something really heavy and felt yourself hold your breath, you're holding your breath for a reason. You're trying to build up internal pressure to push out against as your diaphragm and your transverse abdominis and things like that pull in. Because by pushing in and pulling out at the same time, you make the walls of your barrel strong. And I'm sure if you've ever lifted up something really heavy before, you felt it in your loins, like in your pelvic floor. And that, again, is you building up pressure in this barrel system with your fascia to make your core rigid temporarily while you lift, because your core is not always rigid. In fact, most of your core is not rigid at all right now. You're slumped over, and I don't mean that in a derogatory way, but I mean you're slumped over in a chair or in bed or whatever right now because you don't want your core to be rigid all the time. But that is just another way that fascia structurally, ties your body together. And why somebody's breathing, might affect their tension, right? We know that breathing has a mind-body connection, right? Connects your like slowing down your breathing tends to relax you and make you feel less anxious. But also, working on your breathing could actually affect your muscular tension and such. So just want to point that out really quick. We're going to skip ahead to fascial lines here, so hang on. This is going to go memorize all this stuff I'm going by really quick. Okay. All right. So, this is actually a really useful little diagram. I want you to look at tippy pole here. We are trying to get people to be stacked poles, but tippy pole here from the side is trying to make a really interesting example. And they're trying to say that if my head tips over this way, my body has to tip out that way, and my hips have to tip out that way, and my legs have to tip out that way. What they're trying to say is that when you have a problem in one area, you tend to S-curve it down your fascial lines. That's true from front to back too, by the way. You already do some of that front to back. So front to back, if my head goes forward, my butt goes out more back. It has to balance me out. So we do that all the time. You guys do this when you're carrying a really heavy suitcase before you go on some tropical trip that I know you guys are all going to go on. You hold this big heavy suitcase and you have to lean the other side of your body over to offset the suitcase. And so what they're saying here is if you have somebody and for whatever reason their head goes over to the right, then their hips have to go over to the left. And if their hips go over to the left, their knees kind of have to go over to the right. And they're talking about how we compensate. Now, you don't need to memorize that. But what we want you to realize is that means there's going to be compensation from left to right if you see a problem from left to right. It also means there will be compensation from front to back if you see a problem from front or back. So if you see somebody's butt sticking out really far and back, there might be a problem with their neck too, because it's got to compensate. And we don't know which came first, the chicken or the egg, but the fact is they are linked. So I have said this since the beginning of class, but this is why when somebody comes in with a hurt neck, they really might have a hurt neck. I know it's hurting them. That might be the problem. But I always look at things like their feet and their low back and their hips, because if those things are out of alignment, the neck, they affect the neck and vice versa. And I don't even try to figure out which came first. I just try to fix all of them. All right, let's look at fascial lines. Okay. So one of the most important fascial lines, and there are many, and we will talk about them, is what's called the superficial back line. And they call it superficial, by the way. It's not that superficial, but they recognize you have core fascia inside, like I just talked about with the barrel. Like your diaphragm is part of your internal fascial system and such. But we're talking about more superficial stuff here. So this is really key. So let's talk about superficial back line and why you might care about it and how you would implement it in your massage. So your body, as far as we know, and we have really good reason to believe this, is aware you have a superficial back line. I'm not saying that your body knows it's called the superficial back line or we call that, but it knows that there is a network here and it senses problems along this network. And yes, it can sense individual things on the network, but it knows it's a network and it behaves as though there's a network here. So if we start out with the fascia on the bottom of your foot, that's your plantar fascia. Your plantar fascia feeds into the heel of your foot, your calcaneus. Notice that you can't see a difference between where that fascia ends and becomes your gastrocnemius. So this is what's not good about anatomy books. Anatomy books have told you a huge lie. They've told you that the gastrocnemius inserts into the calcaneus. Because we know that in order to remove the gastrocnemius, we'd have to cut it off the calcaneus. So in that sense, it does insert there. But what they don't tell you is that that same fascia and tendon seems to continue on as a ligament all the way down through the foot and all the way to the toes. So it would be more true to really say your gastrocnemius inserts all the way into your toes, really. Except it grabs onto stuff along the way. So in learning origins and insertions, it makes you think that that tendon stops there, right? But it doesn't. That tendon continues on. And this gastrocnemius that comes from the plantar fascia, gastrocnemius, crosses over the knee and melds with the fascia of the hamstrings that come across the knee. Right here at the knee, this fascia is attached to one another. And we know this for a fact. This is why it's harder to do a dorsiflexion and bend over at the waist than it is to do a plantar flexion and bend over at the waist, because you tighten up this fascia and it's all connected in the back. I mean, you can do that test right now. I can put my foot up on this table right here, and pulling my toes to me causes tension in my hamstrings, and it shouldn't if the books are right, but the books are wrong. The fascia from my gastrocnemius is attached to the fascia of my hamstrings, so when I stretch my gastrocnemius more, I actually get tension in my hamstring. In fact, people with bad backs, sometimes you can bend their foot forward and it hurts their back, because that's where we're headed. So this fascia goes up and connects into ligaments called, there's a ligament up here called your sacral tuberous ligament. It goes from your sacrum to the ischial tuberosity here. And you cannot tell a difference. Remember, the hamstrings are supposed to have an origin of the ischial tuberosity, and they do. But right at that origin, we notice that there's no stopping there. It goes into this ischial ligament here, the sacral ischial ligament, and then goes up into your thoracolumbar aponeuroses or right into your longissimus. Doesn't matter. All that fascia connects. Goes up into your longissimus, even attaches up into the suboccipitals, all that stuff there, and goes up into the gallia aponeurotica and frontalis and the occipitalis. So this whole back line is connected. Now, why does that matter? Well, it matters for a couple of reasons. One is it means when you absorb stress, you actually absorb it all the way through this line and many other lines we're about to talk about. But the other thing is your body is really intelligent. And so if you're injured, let's say in your back, it's very normal for your body to also tense up your hamstrings and gastrocnemius and all this stuff along that line to try to stabilize the back fascial line. It won't let you bend over very well because it doesn't want you to bend over because you have a hurt back. So an injury along this back fascial line tends to cause tension and shortness across the entire back fascial line. An injury in the line tends to cause tightness and tension along the entire line. And when the entire line is tight, it causes postural problems. Usually the body is pretty good at healing the injury. What happens is we're left over with the after effects. Many of your clients are going to come to you with problems resulting from an injury they no longer have. What did I just say? Many of your clients are going to come to you with PTSD, basically, of their fascial system from trauma that's no longer there, the original trauma. But the back fascial line's still holding tight. And then this ties all the way back into what we were talking about in the beginning, Ms. Dowler. If there's a problem with this anywhere down this line, it would behoove you to try to work the whole line. Because if you can create just a little bit of space in the plantar fascia, which is why it's so important to work feet, and then up the gastrocnemius, and then the hamstrings, and then through the gluteal region, and then up the longissimus, and then up into the suboccipitals, and even some scalp massage, it is very likely you'll create enough movement in this entire line to free up the entire line. If there are adhesions or areas where this line is sticking, and fascia and muscles and stuff do stick to your bones in areas they're not supposed to stick to, massaging it and freeing it up in one area tends to let it be free in the entire thing. So the way we get dramatic progress with somebody is to work an entire fascial line, because each little area we can only make a little bit of progress in. But if you make a little bit of progress in a whole bunch of areas, you get a tremendous amount of change. So, when you find that you have people that have problems or tension or pain in any area along this back fascial line, I recommend you work the whole line. If you have problems with somebody who's having a hard time bending over and touching their toes, we recommend you work the entire back fascial line. It will help. Progress along the entire line will help. So we don't want you really just to think about back problems anymore. That's why when somebody comes in with a back problem, we take it all the way up to the neck and head, and we take it all the way down through the hamstrings, gastrocnemius, calves, and the plantar fascia. I can't emphasize the plantar fascia enough. If you guys look on YouTube, I don't know what it's called, but there is a really neat video of a guy who's a fasciologist. He's a massage therapist basically. And a client comes in and they don't cut the video because nobody would believe it if they did. Like they want you to see the whole results. They have somebody come in and try to touch their toes and they can't. They have them roll a ball underneath their feet for about 2 minutes just to loosen up the plantar fascia here. Their plantar fascia. And then they bend over and touch their toes. Because this whole back fascial line matters. Please don't underestimate feet especially, but this whole back fascial line matters, top to bottom. So, we're going to move on to the next fascial line, but that is your plantar fascia, gastrocnemius, hamstrings, longissimus, suboccipitals, and gallia apnerotica. And this is why I made such a big deal about muscles that cross over more than one joint. All these muscles cross over more than one joint. The gastrocnemius crosses over the ankle and the knee. The hamstrings cross over the hip and the knee. The longissimus crosses over 24 joints of your spine. Like, that's why those muscles tend to be important, because they tend to be parts of long fascial chains, and they tend to be structurally important. Questions? Comments? Thoughts? Ponderances? Okay. No? So that's your superficial back line. Okay. So, this is meat from a human body. I don't know another way to put that. This is actually removed from a human body, and it is what we just looked at. So, the epicranial fascia is your gallia apnerotica. These are just different names for the same stuff. This is going over the skull of somebody. This is their gallia apnerotica. This is things like suboccipitals and even like splenius capitis. This is your erector spinae muscles. This is where the person's hips would be, and this is their sacral tuberous ligament. These are the hamstrings coming down across the knee. What is this guy right here? That's your gastrocnemius. Now this is a very, very important picture, because you guys have been sold, we all have been sold by anatomy books for hundreds of years now, a very big lie. And that lie is, what happened is we divided up the human body like a butcher would divide up a cow. And it's normal, because that's how we first learned about the human body, right? But when you guys, go and buy a filet mignon or a rump roast, it doesn't just fall off the cow that way. A butcher decided to divide it up that way. And yes, the rump roast comes from the gluteus maximus, but they decide where to cut and how to divide that up. And they did that in anatomy too. They said, well, this erector spinae here seems to help the spine stay erect, helps you do a extension of the spine. And they cut it out and said, let's study it. But in cutting it out, they lost the whole meaning of what it really does. Right? So it's almost like if I bring a small car part to you and say, this is what this car part does. Well, yes, it does, but it doesn't do it by its own. And if it's not attached to all the other parts, it's not really that important. So we separated the hamstrings out because we could see them flex, and we knew they helped bend the knee. And we were so fascinated when we first found muscles, a couple hundred years ago, really, not that long ago, that they contracted, and we knew that moved the body along, that we studied them from a movement point of view only and not from a structural integrity point of view. And we said that's what's fascinating about them. And so we studied them separately and we cut them out separately. And when artists drew them into a book, like Trail Guide for Anatomy, which happens to be one of the top anatomy books you can get, truly is, they drew them as separate muscles to help you learn them. But they're not separate. And to this point, we really could have taught anatomy like this. We could have said, hey, today we're actually going to learn about the back fascial line. We're not going to learn about the 3 calves, the 3 hamstrings, the 3 erector spinae. We're going to learn about the calf that's really important. You know, the other ones are important too, but for a different reason. We're going to learn about the hamstrings that go across the knee. We're going to learn about the erector spinae, especially the longissimus that goes up the thing. We're going to learn about the sacrotuberous ligament. We're going to learn how it connects all the way up to your head. Because they tend to work in a unit. They tend to work in a unit. And this is why athletes train this way now. You know, it used to be that people kind of trained by isolating muscles. Now there's a big trend to do quite the opposite. Almost everything is a multi-joint exercise. People are looking at, you know, clean and jerks and power lifts and all these type of things that use multiple joints and try to work an entire fascial line at once. Yeah. So, here's that same fascia on the back of a human body. Well, back of a skeleton. Just letting you look at it for a second. There's not much to say. But this is one of the ways we want you to think about working the back fascial line. Yeah. And to realize they really do this. Remember when I was telling you guys you need to massage the hamstrings until you hit this bone here and you need to work the glutes, all that kind of stuff? That's why. Because if you are a massage therapist that is really just working the belly of muscles, they will feel better. The belly is where the power comes from, but you're not making fascial change in the body. Not much. You're making some, but not much. Yeah. So if you really want to create change in the body, you've got to work through these entire networks and kind of connect them all the way down. So they remove this stuff, and then we study it and we go, oh, those are hamstrings. But when we look at a real body, it's all running together. That's hopefully what you'll see in the cadaver lab. So, but even they don't kind of look at it the same way we do. These are medical students, and they're interested for different reasons. Anyway, but here you go. Just another way to look at it. Here's your semispinalis capitis and cervicis tying into your gallia aponeurotica, iliocostalis, sacrofacial stuff, hamstrings, gastrocnemius, plantar aponeuroses. From your gallia aponeuroses to your plantar aponeuroses, you are connected. I know I'm beating this into the ground, but if you are not working people's feet, where your body senses a lot of how much tension is on this back fascial line, you are not helping them very much. Okay, that's back fascial line. Superficial back fascial line. Boom. Love it. Superficial back fascial line. Boom. Love it. Sorry, here's more. Okay, so I have this picture up here because I want you to see some pictures of fascia and recognize what they are. This is actual muscle fiber being teased up. So this is very microscopic. And you got to remember each of these muscle fibers, make sure that I've got my pointer on the thing I want. Yes. These muscle fibers right here that contract, those are wrapped in fascia too. But what we want you to recognize is there's also fascia that's running between them. This spider web kind of stuff here. It's everywhere. Does this look a little bit like a ham steak? Because that's what it pretty much is. This is a femur here, and this is a cross section through a femur, which is what a ham steak is, by the way. When I started studying all this, it made me go vegan. But anyway, all this white marbling you see, that's fascia. That's the fascia that's wrapped around sections of muscle in the thigh. Right? So we've got, by the way, fascia around the individual muscle fibers, fascia between the muscle fibers themselves, giving them integrity, fascia around groups of muscles, all that kind of stuff. Fascia attaching muscle to bone and skin to bone here in these fascial networks. And remember, the bone, look inside the bone, is a fascial network too. It's just filled in with hardened material. It's all a fascial network. Connective tissue, or fascia, is the most numerous tissue in the body. It's not nervous tissue. It's not muscular tissue. It's connective tissue. You have more connective tissue than anything else in your body because it's everywhere. It is the force. Okay. Here's the plantar fascia. It's actually a picture of your plantar fascia coming from your heel down here, branching out to distribute the weight of the back fascial line all the way out through your foot and to your toes. The whole system is meant to distribute weight out, to distribute forces out. And this explains why the arches of your feet work and all that good stuff too. So this bottom fascial line right here that then attaches up into a calf muscle up here is a big bow and arrow structure meant to distribute impact. That's why people get plantar fascia from running too much and carrying too much weight and all sorts of stuff, because this thing gets constantly stretched, and it's meant to be this elastic band that kind of helps you bounce along. By the way, notice that it doesn't just end here. By the way, it wraps into the fascia up here and kind of continues on back up. It's amazing. And too much tension can cause things like heel spurs and all sorts of stuff. But I really want you to think about this whole back fascial line, that it's one continuous band. So when you're massaging to somebody's heel, you should be massaging around it, through it, over it, everything. It's all connected. This is an amazing setup that allows you to stand on these toes here and spring off them and have power and not break them and all sorts of stuff. By the way, what's this piece of fascia here called? Anybody? What type of fascia is this?
Retinaculum.
Awesome, thank you. I'm glad several people said it. Retinaculum. It's holding the tendons in place here underneath your malleolus, your medial malleolus, so they can go around. These are tendons from the back that you hopefully are familiar with. These are things like your tibialis posterior and flexor digitorum longus and flexor hallucis longus all come running underneath there to head down to here. Very cool. All right. So this is what I was talking about. This creates kind of a bow and arrow effect that allows you to absorb stress as the heel is pulled back under tension every time you take a step. It's very cool. Okay. Enough about that. Sorry, I want to get on to the next fascial line here. Bear with me. And so, by the way, there are many, for those of you that want little tricks about doing massage, because of this kind of back fascial line phenomenon and fascial lines in general, because it's not just the back fascial line, a lot of people like to work clients while they're in a stretch, or stretch them and massage them at the same time. Because the idea is that's what you're really trying to do anyway. So if you can incorporate stretch and massage, what I call macro and a micro stretch into your massage work, you're probably a good idea. All right, this is just small but central stuff. Don't forget about the suboccipitals. They tie into all this craziness. Sorry. Okay. If you have a back line, you have to have a front line. Because your body is in constant tension in good ways, it's in gentle tension, pulling you back and forward so you can stand upright and do your massage. The front line ties you together in a really kind of nifty way that I want you to see here. Let's look at it from, even though it's the front line, look at it from the side here. Does anybody know what this muscle is coming from the mastoid process down to the sternum and clavicle here?
Sternocleidomastoid.
Yes, it is. That feeds into the fascia of your rib cage and chest. And by the way, it doesn't matter if it does or not, because bones work just as good as fascia to tie you together. But it ties into all this stuff here. Goes down into this abdominal muscle that hooks down into your hips. This abdominal muscle is your rectus abdominis. That is connected to your rectus femoris. I know you don't see them connected. I don't mean that way. They're connected via bone. But if you pull on the pelvis, you will affect this area over here. These are intimately connected. The pelvis doesn't flex that much. So they're connected here. So think about it. Sternocleidomastoid hooks into chest fascia, goes into your rectus abdominis, which goes into your rectus femoris. Rectus abdominis, rectus femoris, down into the fascia here, and down into your anterior tibialis. And this is your front fascial line. Now, I want to ask you all a question. This muscle here, the SCM, the sternocleidomastoid, inserts back here into the mastoid process, and believe it or not, into the gallia aponeurotica and all that kind of stuff. What else inserts into the mastoid process?
Longissimus.
Thank you. And what is the longissimus part of?
Back fascial line.
Yes. So the two lines come together essentially at the mastoid process and actually tent off of the back of your head. And, by the way, attach into your gallia aponeurotica there and kind of pull down your entire head. Really, in many ways, your head is a tent pole for a lot of these fascial lines. Yeah. So the front fascial line is attached to the back fascial line. We're going to see it attached to the feet, too. But at the mastoid process. How important is the mastoid process to massage? Probably on everybody, probably regardless of their situation. Pretty important. Are we going to find this fascial line connects down underneath the feet to the front fascial line too? Yeah, we are. Are the feet really important? Yeah, they are. They connect the front and back fascial lines. Super, super key. All right. Okay, let's see here. Moving kind of right along. Sorry, guys. I'm hopping up to some other stuff that's going to be a little bit more important. This is a terrible picture. But here's your front and back fascial lines. Let's see if we can, here we go. So, they really believe that your front and back fascial lines are very much like this ship. This is your body here, right? This is your spine and your legs that are the mast of the ship. Yeah? And this really is like your chest and your sternum kind of coming out here and tying you back down. This is your back fascial line here. We know it's not the same exact proportions of a ship, but it's designed to help keep this mast up straight. Again, look at the size of this person's feet, which are normal average feet, and look how tall they are compared to the structure they're on. You guys are incredible. The shortest of you in this class are incredibly tall for the size of your feet, for the size of any feet. People are very tall, and it's a lot to balance a mast on top of a boat that can wobble around the ground and all the crazy stuff you do. And this is how the front and back fascial lines help you to do that. Yeah. Cool? So could there be a tug-of-war between a front and back fascial line? Yes, there can be. Does the front fascial line, by the way, not only go into the anterior tibialis, but also goes into the extensor digitorum longus, which ties down to the toe fascia and ties all the way to the plantar fascia and right back up the backside, yes. So you have a complete circle here. And remember, the fascial network is a thinking network. It has nerves in it too. So when it senses tension down here in your feet and such, or up in your neck, it tends to lock down the whole network. There are also things that connect the front of your body to the back of your body that we've really never talked about. Your quadratus lumborum is in back of you. It's your deepest abdominal muscle, but we all know it's on the back side of you. And it feeds right down into your iliacus, which is part of your iliopsoas, right? And goes into really the front of your body. So because you need to have fascial connections from the front to the back. This is how we distribute forces from front to back as well, not just from the front and back fascial lines, but also through the center of your body. Okay. You also have lateral or side fascial lines. These are very important when people are out of balance left to right. Front and back fascial lines are very important when people are out of balance front to back. When you see people with problems like this, that's front and back fascial lines usually. When you see people with problems like a hip sticking out and a shoulder up too high and head tilted over to the left or right, that tends to be lateral fascial lines. Are some of these the same muscles? Yes, they are, by the way. For the lateral fascial lines, we find the sternocleidomastoid on each side is important. We also find the splenius capitis and splenius cervicis are important. They're on the sides here too, and even scalenes, really. All the intercostals and your internal and external obliques, which run two different directions here. Yes, I am good. Two different directions here tie into your hips. Your hips tie into your IT band that ties into your peroneals and goes down underneath your foot. And by the way, don't forget that these lateral fascial lines also tie into your front and back lines. So for example, when we go up the lateral fascial line and we get to the sternocleidomastoid, you could argue that then it hooks into the front fascial line and goes down the front, or it goes down the back side here. When we get down to the foot and go into the peroneals, the peroneus longus inserts in the exact same place on the bottom of the foot as one other muscle. The peroneus longus inserts in the back, exact same place on the bottom of the foot as one other muscle.
Is it the tibialis?
Tibialis.
It is the tibialis anterior. The tibialis anterior is part of the front fascial line. And this is a way that your body distributes stress down different fascial lines into other fascial lines in a good way, so that you can bounce along and handle stress and move and such. It's all connected. Every last little bit of it. And so this IT band starts to become really, really important because it's part of the side fascial line, but it also ties into the glutes here that go to your backside, right? It goes and hooks down into here and goes through the peroneals. It can even wrap around into the tibialis anterior. It doesn't matter because it's going to hook up with the peroneals and the tibialis anterior eventually anyway, at the bottom of the foot. And it can even spiral down. So sometimes they study what are called spiral fascial lines, where the IT band is spiraling down and going into the anterior tibialis. And this is true right here. This connection doesn't end here. The IT band really does bleed into, weave into, just change into, actually be a better thing, into the tibialis anterior and into the peroneus longus and brevis over here. So, what do we have here? We have a biceps femoris, which is your lateral hamstring muscle, going down your leg. Do you see any separation here? No. It's pretty thick, actually. Turning into the fibularis longus or the peroneus longus, attaching underneath the foot at the same spot and becoming the tibialis anterior. Tibialis anterior hooking up and becoming the iliotibial band, going into the tensor fasciolata. So where back tension even here can go into side tension, get wrapped up, and go to the other side. It's quite amazing. Remember when I said the fibularis longus or the pronaos longus and the tibialis anterior are the stirrup of the foot? By the way, sorry to confuse you guys. This picture really should have both these on the same side of the way because this tibialis anterior crosses back over. But remember when I said this is the stirrup of the foot? It really is the stirrup of the foot. It's your fascial stirrup. And it explains what they call spiral fascial lines because they recognize you don't just move front to back, left to right, you also move rotationally. So, follow along carefully, but it's very common for people with left to right problems to have a problem on this right shoulder and then this left hip and then this right knee and this left ankle. That's very common. And let's look at how spiral lines work. If we have the splenius capitis right here, goes into the rhomboids, which the rhomboids insert into the medial border of the scapula. What else inserts into the medial border of the scapula?
Subscapularis. Right?
Serratus anterior.
Serratus anterior. Yeah. Subscapularis is under there, sir, but not really. Serratus anterior, which, if you follow that under, it comes sneaking out from here. That's serratus anterior. Turns into external and internal obliques. Goes down the IT band. Crosses over to the tibialis anterior. Goes underneath the foot. Goes up the pronaos longus and goes back up the hamstrings and back. And goes right back up the back fascial line. So again, this gets really confusing because we taught you all these muscles separately. Now we're putting them together and we're saying, hey, there's a front fascial line, a back fascial line, a side fascial line. But then we're saying, oh, by the way, they can really all connect together and they can be spiral fascial lines where we've actually connected a side fascial line to a back fascial line and a front fascial line, right? They're starting to cross over. They're different railroad tracks depending on how your body wants to distribute stress. When you guys are doing lots of lateral movements, like ice skating, you would use lots of these. And this is why we don't show you all this in the beginning. It's too much. But I really want to emphasize, by the way, at this point, that your splenius capitis really turns into your rhomboids, and your rhomboids turn into your serratus anterior. Your rhomboids pull your scapula up and back. Your serratus anterior pulls it down and forward. They connect right here at the medial border of the scapula. And then they wrap around and do all this other fancy-dancy stuff. Yeah. Don't forget that. Rhomboids really do attach the medial border of the scapula and turn into the serratus anterior. They really are kind of the same muscle, fighting over the same thing. Serratus anterior turning into the external and internal obliques. So again, they cut this stuff up for us to study because we study it by actions and such like that. But really, this stuff, you know, hits a border and becomes something else, basically. Almost like when you're driving along a road and the road hasn't changed, but Thunderbird becomes Cactus. Same road. Just goes through an intersection. We call it something different. This diaphragm is trying to show you how the rhomboids and serratus anterior pull your scapula front and back around your rib cage. Very hard concept to get, but really important one for you guys to get. Then, I'm not going to go into this, but then there are what are called functional lines too that help you do other things like your arms move and such. And it's how, like, when you guys do a pull-up, all that force, which is lifting your entire body up, has to be sewn into your lower body. And one of the ways you do that is your lats really are sewn into your bottom, down into your hamstrings. your pectoralis major really does go into your chest fascia and into your rectus abdominis, and believe it or not, down into your adductor muscles. This is your adductor longus right here. And so these are functional muscles, and you will see this in clients, by the way. Let's look at this really quickly. You can take a client's arm out to their side like this, where they feel stretched in the chest, and then bend their wrist. Do this carefully. Bend their wrist back a little bit, and they'll be like, ah! That's because that whole fascial chain exists there. The pecs really are tied into some fascia that's inside the humerus that goes down into the forearm flexors, all the way down into the flexor digitorum stuff. So all that's tied together. And we know that for a fact because we put an arm out with somebody and we say, hey, do you feel a stretch here? And they go, yeah. And then we bend the wrist back a little bit and they're like, ah! We're like, what's the problem? They're like, it hurts throughout the whole thing. Yeah, because it's all connected. I mean, we know that for a fact now. And those are called functional fascial lines. To give you an idea of like how you move your arms, how you distribute force through them as well. Yeah. Okay. So, oh, sorry, let me show you one other thing, too, because I've got a good picture of functional fascial line on the backside. Sorry, guys. Bear with me. Here is, I hope you guys can recognize this triangular muscle here. This is your trapezius. What was the insertion of the trapezius? This is why we wait to the end of the course to teach this. The insertion of the trapezius is the lateral 1/3 of the clavicle, the acromion process, and the spine of the scapula. What is the origin of the deltoid?
The same.
The same. Lateral 1/3 of the clavicle, acromion process, which would be right here, and spine of the scapula right here. Yeah. They act as one. They are part of a fascial chain. This is going down into, by the way, your extensor digitorum stuff down in your forearm. And it's all tied together as one piece of meat, of fascia. Yeah. They just chopped it up to discuss movement. And it's true, these different muscles, it's true your deltoids do a different movement than your trapezius, but almost always they're all working together, and even when they're not working together, they're tied together. And so we studied muscles on the basis of the fact that we thought it was cool that they moved stuff. But that doesn't mean that's all they do. So, okay. That was a lot of stuff to throw at you. But we wanted to give you some stuff to kind of, I don't know, think about. For those of you that are ready to think about that. Some of you are not, you know, and that's okay. Some of you have different goals with your practice. But for those of you that want to start to take your anatomy to a higher level and put it together in different sorts of ways, that's what you can do when you have a really strong anatomy foundation. Yeah. Questions? Comments? In the last 5 minutes of lecture that you will ever have with me until you come to all of my continuing ed classes, which you will. Comments of any kind in the last 4 minutes of this class?
What a journey.
Yes, it is. What a journey. Yeah. It's been
From head to toe.
Yes, it is. Thank you. What a journey from head to toe and back up the side of the toe and around the other toe and over to the other side. Yeah. Thank you. I agree. I really do. And this is what's so exciting about the future you guys have. They're just discovering this stuff now. Most massage schools don't teach it at all. They'll be like, oh, I learned a little bit about fashion. No, you didn't. Some do, but most don't. You'll find that you're actually quite competitive in the open market. It's like what Miss Bauer told you guys. Because I told her class the same thing. I'm like, you're going to get out there and see you're actually quite exceptional. And they did. And you guys will too. So, I encourage you to be an explorative massage therapist. try new stuff. Try new stuff on paying clients. For the love of God, try stuff at clinic and on your externships. Please. By the way, I will be sending out an email to the Australia people about clocking in and out even during clinic and externships. Please do your best and help me and just read the email and try to do what it says. It's just about how to clock in and when to clock in and out and stuff. I greatly appreciate it. It'll make your life easier too, I promise. And yeah, it's been a very good journey. I'm very excited that all 22 of you will be graduating. Do not blow it by missing class. Right? Please? Sorry, that's not me lecturing you. That's me caring. I've seen people do it before. Oh, whatever. I'll make that up later. And then something happens. Like, don't. Just come to class. Yeah. You know? You're bleeding. Just put a Band-Aid on it. Come to class. Whatever it is. Come to class. Yeah?